after all the Kevin Bacon connections, brought to you at enormous expense, Mr. Randy Gilmeister.
All of the nice things you guys have said, but you kind of ruined me being able to under-promise and over-deliver, because I know it's going to be tough to meet all of that. So first, I got to put the microphone down, because I just started lifting weights again this last week, and so I can't straighten my arms, and I pull the microphone, so I got to stand here. And it's like like a balance of like not killing yourself at the gym and then trying to not be a fat ass at the same time. So that's the balance I'm still working on. So as Bruce mentioned, the number one real estate search on Google last year was, is the market going to crash? So today I'll answer those questions. What's going to happen with real estate in 2022? How long are these, I'm sure you've seen in the news, the unprecedented high prices and low inventory going to last? And then the little known truth, and I'm sure, Bruce, do you want the truth?
I can.
The little known truth about what is behind these trends. Because if you ask somebody, well, what's going on? Well, supply and demand, but why? Why is the supply low? And you hear supply chains, that's not the answer. And then finally, after helping hundreds of families buy and sell property here in Las Vegas, I'm also going to share what I found to be the biggest mistake when it comes to owning property and family wealth. So a couple reasons behind the inventory and prices. Number one is inflation, which we're all now aware of. My wife just said the other night, my whole life the ice cream at McDonald's was $1 and now it's $2. So we understand how that process works. But there's actually two parts to inflation that I'm going to break down a little bit to understand a little more about, so that you understand about not only what's happening now, but can predict what's going to happen for the next year, 2, 3 years. So the first is construction costs. And construction costs are a factor of materials and labor. We've all seen in the news over the last year that certain materials, concrete, steel, lumber, are up between 50 and actually up to 150% of where they were a couple years ago. And then when it comes to labor, they haven't even started to raise the minimum wage, which people have been talking about this $15 minimum wage for the last couple of years. So wages are already up, and how many people think that it's going to be any cheaper, and then, or at least people working, is going to be cheaper for builders in the next couple of years? Well, it's not. So this puts a lot of pressure on builders to be able to come in with these projects, and at this point they're just not able to keep up with the demand and the growth. Here's an interesting figure. There were actually less homes built in the last 10 years than any decade since the 60s. So now, babies are being born faster than homes being built, and CNBC put out an article that read, the U.S. is short 5.24 million homes. The second inflation factor, as it hits a 40-year high, is that what I would suggest are smart people, high net worth people, buy assets like commercial and residential real estate as a hedge. So, Randy, what's a hedge? Well, an inflation hedge is an investment to protect the decreased purchasing power of a currency that results from the loss of its value due to rising prices from inflation. Let me give you a simple example. So let's say you have an investment in a stock that offers a 5% return, and if inflation's at 6%, then you're actually losing 1% as long as you're in that investment. And here's what's worse, is that for any of us who have money in the bank, we know that if it's in a savings, it's a fraction of a percent. And when you watch the news, they'll say that inflation's at 8%, but that's not even close. Because when you see those figures, they don't factor in real estate or energy. And we know that if you've gone to buy a house or a car or know anyone who's gone to buy either of these in the last year, Real estate's up over 20%, and cars are actually have a higher rate over the last year in terms of inflation. They're over 20% for cars. So what does that have to do with real estate? Real estate is the most attractive during these kinds of times because investors can take advantage of rising prices and the rent increases. Actually, when I walked in today, Bruce said he saw on the news this morning the story of how high the rents are. And the rents are higher than they've ever been also here in Las Vegas. So how long will inflation last? And so share some figures with you. Stuart Barney of Fox Business suggested that there's a wall of money that has been coming into the market over the last year or so, and we're not even, I just was telling Rob, not even halfway through. So let me share some, and I gotta read this one, so bear with me. So here's some figures. 192 billion, the Families First Act, 483 billion, Paycheck Protection, 2.2 trillion, that's trillion with a T, the CARES Act, 900 billion, Consolidated Appropriations Act. So hold on. So this is money that's already been approved, but hasn't even filtered into the economy yet. So here comes the really big money. 1.9 trillion, the American Rescue Plan, 1.2 trillion, the infrastructure plan, and the last one here, we don't know if it's going to get approved. It's probably going to get a little chopped up. There's been some pushback over the last couple of months of the Build Back Better plan, but right now it's at 1.85 trillion, and that's over, if we do the math, $7.5 trillion, and I've not even counted the trillions that the Federal Reserve has printed. So that's part one of what's happening with the real estate prices and inventory. So reason two, and this is what I found to be less known, we don't really see this in the news, is that it has to do with institutional investors. So institutional investors are pension funds, retirement hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance. And they've actually been buying homes here in the Valley since 2008. So if you add it up, there are actually tens of thousands. Me and Phil, we tried to come up with a number. How many homes do you think these institutions have bought? And let me back up a little bit. They're buying them for rent. Okay, so you may have seen in the news some of the companies are flipping houses. These are companies that are buying homes just to rent. They're going to hold on to them now and forever. And so then I say they're off the market forever, meaning it's like a vanished inventory. So why do I say forever? Well, when you or I buy a home, and the statistic is it turns over about every 7 years, meaning we may have a reason to sell, families getting bigger, smaller, maybe an investment, we're going to sell it for kids' education or just cash out and travel. But these hedge funds that have been buying homes for rentals, they're now rental-backed securities. And why would they sell? What are they going to do with the money? They're still buying homes. So it's not like the house they bought for $200,000 7-8 years ago, where they were getting $1,200 rent, and now it's worth $350, and they're getting $1,500-1,600 rent. Why would they sell it? I actually heard, and this is I don't know, say it's good or bad news, but from two friends of mine who are acquisition managers for some of these hedge funds, that they expect to buy twice as many homes this year as they did last year. And the challenge for, let's say, buyers in the market here in Las Vegas is that they're buying entry level. So a few years ago, they were buying up to $300,000 single family homes. And then they bumped it up to $400,000. Now it's up to $500,000. And they send me messages. Randy, do you have any houses coming on the market for, here's our criteria, under $500,000, no pool, no solar. So they send this criteria out to brokers like myself. So I don't know how to think about it. Good, bad, right, or wrong, because I consider myself a capitalist. But like my wife, who's a teacher, is now priced out of the market. Meaning if her or people in that industry were to buy a house today, they couldn't afford it on those salaries. And what's interesting, and maybe that's probably not the right word, is they're priced out of those entry-level homes likely by her own retirement fund. Because what does that mean? Well, when it comes to pension funds, retirement funds, insurance, when people pay in that money, it doesn't just sit in some savings account and hope you get some interest or something. It's those financial guys' jobs to make that money grow. So in the last number of years, one of the top growth areas is single-family homes. And traditionally, well, why did all this change? Well, traditionally, it didn't make sense for them to invest, let's say, $300 million in buying one single-family home at a time. Because traditionally they would buy shopping centers, malls, big 300-400 unit apartment complexes. But technology changed all of that. Okay, so here's something. I still hear almost, at least weekly, almost daily, by people who don't really understand a lot of this stuff, that, well, there's going to be a correction. There's going to be some price correction. It can't just keep going up. And here's the deal. So I've studied the market for so long that, unfortunately, I get absolutely annoyed by the stupidity of other real estate people, real estate agents, because they're basing whatever they think off of something that happened 12 or 13 years ago. And I'm going to share with you why it's so different now. They still think a real estate crash is coming. The only thing crashing now or in the near future is the dollar.
Right.
The median price of a single-family home here in Las Vegas just this last week hit a new all-time home price record of $435,000, which is, if anyone has been around long enough, we know that is crazy.
Yeah.
So someone may be thinking at this point, oh, well, hold on. I read or I heard that interest rates are going up. Isn't that going to slow down the buyers and they're not going to have what we would call purchasing power? And yeah, I would agree with that. Yes, so interest rates going up means there's less money in the market and buyers have less purchasing power. On the other side, though, it's also going to reduce the number of sellers. Because here's a question. For anyone who owns a house, who's refinanced in the last 2 years? Is there anybody? Okay, right. So a couple.
Thinking about it
Okay, so
in the
that's
process.
it'd be a good idea to do it sooner than later.
Yeah.
I bring that up because for what reason would I sell now when I refinanced last year for 2.75 and now interest rates are going to be at 4.5? And I'll tell you, I've talked to a lot of homeowners over the last couple of years that instead of selling, which traditionally would have happened, they would have sold their house and moved to something that would fit their lifestyle, they just remodeled or dropped in a pool. Actually, last week at the Christian Business Network, I talked to a pool contractor friend. He said in 25 years in business, the last 2 years have been his busiest ever. So it's hard to imagine what this is going to look like and how long this is going to go on because people are just staying. I still hear, we heard a lot last year, again, from these look, I'm just going to say this. 80% of real estate, people with a real estate license really have no idea what they're doing and what's going on. I mean, it's just, I don't know another way to say it. And I know everybody in here I know knows probably 5, 6 real estate agents, whether they're friends or family. You can ask me later how to identify if they know what's going on or if they don't. I don't want to call everyone an idiot. But unfortunately, I heard a lot last year, and I still hear this year, that, the foreclosure moratorium that was going on for 18 months, when that ends, they're all going to get foreclosed, and all those houses are going to come to the market. It's probably one of the most ridiculous. I mean, I've been kicked off Facebook like 3 or 4 times by trying to set these people right, because it's just so stupid. Well, let's address it directly. So when it came to an end, there were a fraction of a fraction that were still in default, number one. And number two, prices have gone up 30% in the last 2 years. So whatever they could have owed, they could just sell their house. There's no foreclosure, they're not coming. So you'll see, and this is, oh man, so you'll go home tonight if you watch the news or you're on your news on your phone or whatever it is. You'll see some ridiculous headline that foreclosures are up, okay? And that's true. They're up from 0 when there was a moratorium. but they're still less than 50% of where we were 2, 3, 4 years ago pre-pandemic. So less than 50%. So, and I said this before, you know, someone thinking that, well, Randy, you're like an optimist. Maybe I do better when people are excited about real estate, or I'm some cheerleader. And it's actually it's just the opposite. Because look, I was hurt, suffered as bad as anyone the last recession. I know that pain and misery. So I made it my mission to never go through that again. And part of that was just not only understanding the statistics and data of what's happening in the market, but what's behind it. So that's why it's so important for me to share all this with you. The bottom line, in 2022, people will not sell their house because the prices are so high. There's nowhere to go. Even the Midwest is expensive now. So unlike 2007, we knew that a lot of those homes eventually would come on the market. And at that time, which is again not today, there were actually over 25,000 vacant homes. So this time, there's no inventory coming, there's no foreclosures, and there's no new homes. And shoot, I forgot a point from earlier when I was talking about those when I was talking about those institutional buyers, those hedge funds. They're not just buying resale. They're buying homes as they're being built. So they'll go to a builder. So when you drive around, and you'll say, "What the hell is Randy talking about? I see all these houses going up right down the street." A lot of those have already been bought by hedge funds that are going to be turned into rentals. So they're not. It's not real inventory. So and I heard a friend of mine say this next thought is that so none of those homes coming out. There's nothing but piles of cash sitting on the sidelines, waiting to be dumped in a neighborhood near you. So any home, even if there was some hint of defaults or foreclosures, the hedge funds, the banks they'd go directly to those funds. And those guys, so this is something I talked about more last year, was I'm paying more attention to, but then it didn't even matter to keep count. These hedge funds have raised trillions of dollars. They still have trillions of dollars. It's not like, well, they're going to buy all the houses and then run out of money. They still have a bunch of money in the bank, and they have to spend it now, especially because of what we talked about earlier with inflation, because they're going to lose the value if it just sits in the bank. So they have to go and buy more assets equals more houses. So unfortunately, the $375,000 buyer here in town that could have bought almost anywhere here in the valley 18 months ago can buy virtually nowhere today. Our locals have been frozen out by the hedge funds and the California exodus, and what some are saying is destroying American homeownership. So at this point, so we're going to kind of move past that price and inventory stuff, but someone may think, well, thanks for the info, Randy, but I'm going to be in my home forever. So the price it makes me feel good, but it's not really that important to me. What I want to know is can I just live in my house? Is it sustainable to be here in Las Vegas? And when we think sustainable, we think water. If you've driven by Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, it's depressing. You see the water line getting lower and lower. Well, here's some good news. I have some good news for you. Oh, I just lost it. Here it is. From 2002 to today, even though over 800,000 people have moved here to southern Nevada, at the same time, we've actually reduced our water consumption by 23%. So I'm going to say that point one more time because I think it's important. Over the last 20 years, 800,000 new people reduced our water consumption by 23%, which is pretty good news. So the Water Authority has a 50-year resource plan that they update annually. He likes that point too. And recently there was an assembly bill passed that requires useless grass or useless turf to be removed by 2026. So now as you're driving around, and I didn't notice out here, you'll see on the roads and outside of office buildings, a lot of that grass being torn out, and it's being replaced by desert landscaping, rocks and shrubs. So that's some good news. They've actually identified over 4,000 acres here in Clark County for removal. So with the prohibition on new turf going forward, grass will only be at schools, cemeteries, and parks. Any new development, no grass allowed. All right, and I'm gonna, at the end, I'll take a couple questions if any of those thoughts you want me to go a little deeper. So now, a little transition, this is what I found, really, to be the biggest mistake when it comes to property owners and their family wealth. As after helping a lot of families as also a probate real estate specialist, I've noticed that a substantial amount of time, energy, and money could have been saved if the owner of that family had protected the asset with something called a trust. So the best piece of advice that I can give, and I do my best to tell my friends, any of my clients, to get a trust. The best piece of advice I can give to avoid what is a costly and really aggravating process is just to set up a living trust. And that's not something I do. That's something I work with a lot of great estate planning attorneys. Because look, most of us, our estate plan is to just live forever, right? And we know that, is that realistic? No. So estate planning with a living trust is really the only way, or the best way, and maybe to protect assets, reduce tax obligations, and avoid probate. Probate is not something that has to be done. Unfortunately, only 5% of property owners actually have their property protected with a trust. So not having, and I know I'm just kind of going in circles with the kind of same thought, but I really wanted to resonate here, is not having your property in a trust is like filing a civil lawsuit against yourself with the government in charge. Here's a thought. Here's a question for you. So do you want a judge to appoint his friend, or the sister you haven't talked to in 10 years, or the son who could blow it all in 6 months, to be in charge of your life wealth? Probate can cost 5 to 20 times or more the cost of just setting up a proper trust, and can take months to years to settle, tying up all the assets. You know, in addition to eliminating probate, it ensures that your assets and your beneficiaries have some privacy. It minimizes the claims, and it reduces the costly court and attorney fees. So I'm going to share now that we can learn from some other people's mistakes, and you may have heard of some of these names. So hopefully, again, it'll resonate. It'll be something that you'll remember from today. Tony Hsieh, founder of Zappos, doing a lot of great stuff downtown, like revitalization projects. I mean, he was really like an inspiration for what was going on here in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, passed last year. Hundreds of millions in assets tied up in probate right now. Some of you at least, Prince, Aretha Franklin, both died without a will, and this led to public fighting of their estates for a long time. And I don't want to take time here. If you have a question, what's the difference between a will and a trust? I'll go into that later on. Jim Morrison died at 27. He had a simple 2-page will that at the time when he died, he wasn't wealthy. He was 27 and he was still going. But he owned 25% of the doors. So think of that value over the last last 40 years, or even years and decades after he passed. And so it was fought over between I believe what I understand, his parents, who he didn't have any relationship with, and his common law wife. So ultimately, not only was it fought over, but it probably would have been his wishes for his own assets not to go to people he didn't have a relationship with. Jimi Hendrix also died at 27, left no will in a messy probate fight. James Brown had some documents, but they were ambiguous, meaning that, and I don't know what exactly that meant, but it took 6 years and millions of dollars to get settled. Now, Michael Jackson had a trust, but unfortunately, he didn't fund it during his lifetime. So what does that mean, fund? It means if you have it, so to name the assets, well, I'll give you an example. For me, so the house I live in is in my trust, meaning the owner is the trust. My bank account, my checking, savings is owned by the trust. But also just naming items in the trust at least would be helpful. So this led to a long and costly battle in California probate court. And where are we? So Howard Hughes, we're in the Howard Hughes Center. So he had wished that his $2.5 billion fortune would have gone for medical research, but he didn't have a valid written will. So I don't to get all the details. A valid written will, meaning maybe it wasn't signed or wasn't notarized. I don't know all the details, but
They never found any will.
they didn't find it. Oh, they didn't find a will.
But there was some frauds, remember that?
Yeah. So
No.
thank you.
Remember that was a big thing in the news, there was even a movie about it.
Mel was
Yeah.
what's his name?
What?
The guy you picked up on the.
Yeah, somebody picked up the side of the road, I found a roll.
Right. So someone had made something up, but it wasn't valid. Right. Thanks for making it more clear. So his $2.5 billion ended up getting divided among his 22 cousins, and who knows what relationship he had with them.
Well, one of his cousins used that money to basically start Summerlin.
Well, we appreciate that,
So there you go.
and hopefully he wanted that too. So the pandemic has caused me to analyze my level of service, and so I'm offering anyone an hour, a complimentary hour with one of the high-powered estate planning attorneys that I work with who primarily focus on protecting families. Because look, it's avoidable. I don't want to see anybody I know go through it. I mean, really, in my daily work, so I'm a real estate broker, about 30% of my business is probate and trust real estate. And every file, every story is somebody fighting over, damn them, that this is not who the decedent wanted to have any of these assets. Here, I'll tell you just a quick story. About a year ago, so a guy passed away. He had some friends living in his house. His daughter lived out of state. They wouldn't let her in the house to get anything. They actually threatened her, and she left town in hiding because she was. So imagine her dad passes away, and she can't even go in to get any personal items. And it was it had a lot more complications than that, but it didn't have to. I mean, but that one, that was. I felt it, because I was talking to her every week, and she was scared. I mean, to have to deal with, the mourning, the passing part, and then to not immediately get, dad's ashes, some of those things. It was really, really unfortunate. So look, I'd love to serve and help you any way I can. I hope that if there's any thoughts or questions, just let me know. I'm happy to talk more about it.